Good morning. Good morning. My name is Susan Bishop. I am a white woman in my mid-70s, and I'm dressed in yellow today. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter who you are, who you have been, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to whoever is watching us on YouTube this morning. During the prelude, please introduce yourself and tell us what neighborhood you're in the comments section. If you're in Oklahoma City, what neighborhood? And if you're elsewhere, tell us what town you're coming to us from. And now the prelude will prepare us for worship.
Good morning. I'm delighted to add my welcome to that of Susan Bishop. She mentioned that she's in her mid-70s. She didn't tell you that it's her birthday today. And therefore, she offered not only to be service associate, but to light the chalice. Happy birthday, Susan.
Thank you.
We light our chalice here in our building in Midtown Oklahoma City. We are on land that was home to indigenous peoples, including the Apache, Caddo, and Wichita, and on land that was taken from the Muskogee, Seminole, and other removed and relocated peoples. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope. I'm Reverend Sue Redfern Campbell, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. For those in our community who may be blind or visually impaired, or who are joining us online without video, I am a short Euro-American woman with short brown and gray hair, wearing black and red today with a white stole, and I have my red cane. that I use for balance. Here at First Unitarian, there is a commitment to sharing pronouns and offering self-descriptions as part of the effort to ensure that no one is excluded from full participation in the life of our church. In this spirit of inclusion, our sanctuary is equipped with a telecoil hearing loop system. Please see your hearing aid provider to learn how to access it. And we have large print orders of service and hymnals available at the back of the sanctuary. Our ushers today are members of the Racial Justice team. The RJT is committed to racial justice and the dismantling of a white supremacy culture within ourselves, our congregation, our faith, and our wider community. Their goals are twofold. First, to facilitate opportunities to learn about racism and white privilege, and second, to support and strengthen relationships with local communities most affected by systemic and institutional racism, those which are already doing anti-racism work. If you are interested in being involved with this team, you can speak with any usher after the service. You will find brief announcements of upcoming events on the back of your order of service. And if you would like contact information for the people listed, Marlise Grogg in the church office can help you with that. And now Maureen Harvey has a special announcement about this afternoon's Voice Accountability session.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Maureen Harvey, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am the chair of the voice team here at First Unitarian. On Wednesday on NPR, there was a short segment that included mention of what the Jesuits call the ministry of presence, the significance of just showing up. Jesuit priest Father James Martin was sharing a story about the impact that simply showing up and being present can have. This afternoon at 4 is one of those opportunities. You have hopefully already heard what this Voice Accountability session will offer in terms of voter education and the building of relational power to take effective actions that will improve our community and state. I'd guess everyone hearing this service today wants to make a positive difference. We want to change lives. We want to serve. A team of people in this church have worked very hard to organize this accountability session, meeting with candidates, preparing personal stories, researching questions, and practicing our delivery. The final piece, but perhaps the most important, is that we need to fill this sanctuary. We're asking you to be present with us. This afternoon at 4 o'clock is when we ask you to show up for us, for each other, for the community. Thank you.
I will be there this afternoon. Hope to see you as well. As we continue to settle into this sacred time together, let's take a deep breath, at least one, maybe 2 or 3. Let go of whatever for us might be getting in the way of our just being present. And I invite you to turn in your gray hymnal, so singing the living tradition, to number 614 at the back of the hymnal. And let's keep centering in with these words from the vision of Black Elk, a holy man of the Oglala Lakota. Your part is the indented italicized part. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell. And I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit. And shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flower tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father, one parent, one creator. And I saw Now I invite you to join in singing our opening hymn from William Channing Gannett, a Unitarian minister and hymn writer from the 19th century. Number 187, It Sounds Along the Ages. Our time for all ages today is a story that I learned from a Jewish storyteller, Sid Lieberman, hailed from Chicago, but I've also heard it attributed to Buddhist lore. So it's said that there once were two brothers and they owned a farm together. Every year they plowed the fields together, they tilled the soil together, they planted the seeds together, they watered the young plants together, and in the fall, when the crops were ready, they shared the harvest equally. And they did this that way for years and years. But one year, after the crops had been harvested and the sharing had been done, one of the brothers found he couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking, why should we share the harvest equally? After all, my brother is married and he and his spouse have 4 children. As for me, I'm alone with only myself to feed. I have plenty. They need the food much more than I do. So, in the dark of night, this brother got up, put his shoes on, picked up a large sack and went out to his barn. He filled the sack full of food, walked across the field to his brother's barn, and added his food to his brother's store. Then he quietly walked back across the field, went back to bed, and promptly fell asleep. That same night, a little later, the other brother couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking, why should we share the harvest equally? After all, I'm married. My spouse and I have 4 children, and they will take care of us in our old age. But my brother, he has no one. He needs more food than I do. So in the dark of night, this brother got up, put his shoes on, picked up a large sack, and went out to his barn. He filled the sack full of food and walked across the field to his brother's barn and added his food to his brother's store. Then he quietly walked back across the field, went back to bed, and promptly fell asleep. Well, this went on for a whole week. In the dark of night, each man brought a sack of food to his brother's barn, and after a few days of this, each brother started wondering, why hasn't my store of food gone down? It looks as large as it ever was. They asked themselves, what's going on? Is it some kind of miracle, perhaps? And then, one moonless night, it was the new moon, in the middle of the fields, the true brothers met. And they didn't just meet, they met like that. And their sacks went flying, and they went flying. And when they picked themselves up off the ground and looked at each other, first they laughed, and then they cried, and then they realized that there had been a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle of magic, it was a miracle of love. And nowadays, people say that it was on that very spot, the place where 2 brothers met, that the great King Solomon built his temple. Here endeth the story.
And good morning again. I forgot to mention that my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm still Susan Bishop. When I learned what Reverend Sue's theme was for today, world religions, I sat back and I asked myself, well, what do I know about world religions? Not a whole lot. But then I really started to think. I participated in a worship service here led by a Sikh, and I knew absolutely nothing about Sikhism before that day. As a teenager in Rhode Island, I learned about the ecumenical movement in the 60s, about Judaism and Christianity's shared lineage. We celebrated Passover with family and friends because of the relationship between our congregational church and the local synagogue. I knew a fair number of scriptures, and I knew a little bit about Jesus' life. If it hadn't been for the ladies' coffee night at the Turkish Raindrop House, I never would have met Sabine and her friends, who have taught me more about Islam and the life of Muslim women, more about Sabine's faith by her generosity of spirit and talents. We've shared many meals together, and she valiantly strives for this skeptic to believe in a God. Any God, she says, will do. I love her for her concerns about my spiritual health and my well-being. While my sexual identity may confuse her, her faith mandates that she embrace me because we are friends. It is because of Raindrop Turkish House that we are able to celebrate Ramadan each year with our Muslim brethren and siblings. So I did what most of us do. I Googled world religions and was surprised when it popped up as its own topic heading. That really did surprise me. And that's when the fun began, because some sources cite 5 major religions, while others cite 7. It didn't surprise me that Christianity in all of its flavors ranked as the most prevalent, although Unitarian Universalism was not among those listed as one of the flavors. Scholars Scholars couldn't seem to agree on whether Judaism or Buddhism were the oldest, and according to the dates I compared, it seems that they may have begun around the same time, but what do I know? Who really does know? Everyone seemed to agree that Sikhism was the fastest growing religion, and I learned that when researching for my reflection last fall. But what surprised me was the unaffiliated religions who earned top spots among the list of the major 7. And this little fact really surprised me, that of the 7 major religions, 4 are monotheistic, while the remaining find the spiritual divine in many forms. For a skeptic, I keep it pretty simple. I don't know if there is or is not a God. It's hard to love something if I don't really know if it exists. I have faith in science and in the goodness of people. I believe hell and heaven are human-created conditions, not some place that I'm going to spend eternity. I believe in justice and equity, whether it's a business transaction or a communal relationship. I see our UU principles in all of the major religions, whether it's our connection to the interdependent web of life or the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Our principles, to me anyway, are the basic concepts from all the other religions. It's what makes our faith so diverse of people, ideas, and our spiritual pursuits. Religious stories are that. They are stories written by people trying to understand the world around them. Each story has a purpose or a message, if you will, and I have found that in all the major religions, the most prevalent message seems to be about love. Even Unitarian Universalism, love ourselves, love each other, love our many connections to life, love our differences, no matter the origin of the story, like where it came from or who wrote it. To me, that isn't what is important. Maybe what is what we all have in common.
So good morning. I'm Fenton Rude. I'm active in the Sustainable Living Organization. I'm an old white guy. I'm wearing my Teal Voice t-shirt for our activity today. I've got a brown hat. Every Sunday we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of June, our Change for Change partner is Oklahoma City Beautiful. I serve on the board of Oklahoma City Beautiful, and it has become one of the most significant forces for sustainability in the Oklahoma City community. This month, we are supporting our school gardens project, building a new garden at Esperanza Elementary near the stockyards. I'll have more information available at the Sustainable Living table after the service today. And so for those of you who are in the sanctuary now, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate. We know that many of you prefer to mail in a check or make your donations to Change for Change online. You can always make your gift by mailing a check to First Unitarian. Just write Change for Change on the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, oneuc.org.
No matter what people say or think about me, I am a child, I am a child of God. No matter what the world says things about me, I am a child no matter what the church says. Decisions, pronouncements on you. You are a child, you are a child of God. And there is nothing and no one who can separate. They can't separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family. You were meant to be a child of God. You are a child of God.
Wow. I invite you to join in spoken and silent prayer. The words for this prayer come from the Reverend Susan Manker Seal. We speak to God, to the Goddess, to the Spirit of life, the eternal. We speak to the mysterious thread that connects us, one to the other, and to the universe. We speak to the deep wisdom at the center of our beings. We share the yearning of all people to touch each other more deeply, to hear each other more keenly, to see each other's joys and sorrows as our own, and know that we are not alone. Out of that yearning, we come to this religious community. May we help each other to proclaim the possibilities we see, to create the community we desire, to worship what is worthy in our lives, to teach the truth as we know it, and to serve justice in all the ways we can, to the end that our yearning is softened, our lives fulfilled in the community of one another. Let us be silent for just a moment. May peace be with you. Blessed be. I begin with a story about a story. In Europe, in the Middle Ages, this story was all the rage. As far as anyone knew, it had first been told in the Greek Orthodox Church. From Greek, it was translated into Latin, and then from Latin into Spanish, French, and Italian. Somehow, it also found its way into German, and from there went north to the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Iceland. It also traveled east from Germany and was translated into the Slavic languages, Czech, Polish, Russian. It's the story of two young men, Barlaam and Josaphat, who became saints, Barlaam and Josaphat. Josaphat is a young prince in India, destined to become king. He lives in a splendid palace surrounded by riches. But one day, he's walking outside the palace and he meets Barlaam, who is a wandering mendicant preacher. Barlaam has sold all he had and gone out into the world to preach the Christian gospel. His preaching moves Josaphat so much that he decides to follow in Barlaam's footsteps. So the young prince renounces his claim to the throne, is baptized, and goes out into the wilderness in search of moral and spiritual treasure. This story was very important in shaping medieval Christian consciousness. It may well have inspired Francis of Assisi, another rich young man who left everything behind. Much later in the 19th century, the story had a dramatic effect on Leo Tolstoy. It sparked his conversion to a life of poverty, nonviolence, and service. And Tolstoy, in turn, had a profound effect on Mohandas Gandhi, who in turn had a profound effect on Martin Luther King Jr. Apparently, Tolstoy found the story of Barlaam and Josaphat in a classic Christian work, The Lives of the Saints. But it turns out the story was not originally Christian. It had come into Christianity from an Arabic source and had long been popular among Muslims. The first Christian version, probably in the 9th century, appeared in the nation of Georgia, which lies close to Muslim lands. And the Muslim story is pretty similar to the Christian one. A wealthy prince gives up everything he has, turns his back on material things, goes off in search of salvation. But it turns out the Muslims hadn't invented the story either. It had come to them from still another religious group, a people known as the Manichees. And who were the Manichees, you may ask? Well, at one time, the Manichaean movement had flourished all over Western Asia and was a strong competitor to early Christianity. But persecution had pushed them eastward to Turkestan in Central Asia. There, Islamic missionaries met up with them. The Manichees learned the story and adopted it as their own. But guess what? The story wasn't original with the Manichees either. Buddhist missionaries, you see, had settled Central Asia during the first 5 centuries of the millennium, and the Manichees had borrowed the story from them. For all we know, the story may have come into Buddhism from another source, but if it did, those origins are lost in time. For the story, it seems, is a Buddhist story. In fact, some might say it's the Buddhist story, the story of Siddhartha Gautama, the young prince who gives up all he has to go out into the world to discover the cause of suffering. Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, which means the one who is awake or the enlightened one. But you may recall that before he became enlightened, he was a bodhisattva, a future Buddha, a seeker after enlightenment. As his story wended his way westward, that name was retained. But the name bodhisattva became Bodhisattva to the Manichees, and Yudhisthana to the Muslims, Yosef to the Greeks, and finally Yosef or Josaphat to Roman Catholics. So the bottom line of this shaggy dog story is that for a very long time, more than 1,000 years, the person we know as the Buddha was also a Christian saint. And his story didn't stop with the Christians. In 13th century Spain, Before Isabella and Ferdinand, Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived together in harmony. And so in Spain, a rabbi learned the story and translated it into Hebrew. It then spread as a Jewish story to Constantinople, and then Italy, Germany, and Poland. In the 19th century, it was translated into Yiddish. Thus, the Buddha has danced through history to different tunes with different names, different costumes, and he has captured the imagination of many faith traditions, inspiring people, transforming lives. And who knows where he or she or they might turn up next. It's very tempting to assume that the world's deep traditions are separate and distinct. It's tempting to classify them, to put them in boxes and tie them with a bow. That way we can stand and point to them, see, that's Buddhist. Over there, that's Islamic. But another view is possible, and it seems more accurate. One leading proponent of this different perspective was the late Wilfred Cantwell Smith, who came from Canada to teach at Harvard Divinity School. I knew him very slightly while I was there. Professor Smith died in 2000, but he taught in the history of religion department for years. That's sometimes known as the World Religions Department. And his work is highly influential, even among people who have never heard of him. Now, Wilfred Cantwell Smith was a committed liberal Christian, a member of the United Church of Canada, but he devoted 25 years of his life to the sympathetic study of Islam. And these studies led him to a passionate interest in the history of religion. While I was at the Divinity School, he published a book called Towards a World Theology, the book from which I learned the story of St. Josaphat, aka the Buddha. A lifetime of studying the world's religions and their interconnections gave Professor Smith a groundbreaking insight. The world's faith traditions are not airtight systems. In fact, the opposite is the case. The Buddha's story is a striking example of this, but there are many others. For example, Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval Christian theologian, was almost certainly influenced by brilliant medieval Islamic thinkers like Averroes and Al-Ghazali. And Henry David Thoreau, who was at least arguably a Unitarian, he inspired Gandhi, who then in turn inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In our own time, the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber has had as great an influence in Christian communities as he's had in Jewish ones. And at a popular level, the American observance of Halloween incorporates elements from pre-Columbian Aztecs as well as the ancient Celtic British Isles. So all these examples suggest that religions are not like boxes. It may be more helpful to think of them as rivers, moving, changing, being fed by streams, joining in the waters of other rivers. Professor Smith went so far as to say it's misleading to use the word religion as a noun. He says it's more accurate to speak of religious process, which includes Buddhist process, Christian process, Islamic process, even Unitarian Universalist process. These processes are formed dynamically by personal faith interacting with cumulative tradition. To speak of Buddhism, for example, as a religion is to imply that it's a unified static entity, even a thing, but in fact it exists in dazzling variety and complexity. Anytime we make a generalization about it, lo and behold, there's an exception. Furthermore, Buddhism has never been static. It's always been flowing and changing. It changes a little bit every time a Buddhist finds new insight. It changes as well whenever a follower of the Buddha is deeply touched by someone from another tradition. I think of the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, for example. As Professor Smith says, every Buddhist who has ever lived has added his or her own particular brick to the structure of the growing Buddhist movement, but then he backs away from the brick metaphor, suggesting it is a too solid word. And even Islam, which tries harder than most to be consistent, really isn't. Since the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis, we Americans have known that there are differences between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. But beyond these, there are other branches, including the Sufis, who seem very different from most Muslims, but who are very much part of the Islamic process. In his own study of Islam, Professor Smith says that he began with the usual notion that Islam was the name of a religion, but then he lived in a Muslim community and became friends with Muslims and watched them wrestle with religious questions. And in the process, he discovered that Islam is subtler than a religion, more fluid, more infinite, more dialectical, more personalist, more faith-like. So when we look at the religious history of humankind with all its variety and interconnectedness, a paradox comes into play. Underneath it all, we begin to discern a unity. And when we become conscious of this, of our own place in it, then a world theology becomes possible. But this world theology is different from what we might expect. It is not about homogenization. It's not about a belief that all religions are the same. It's also not about finding a consensus statement on theology, although it's certainly been tried. As Professor Smith points out, not even one religion is the same century after century, or from one country to another, or from village to city. If we can't boil one tradition down to its essence, how can we possibly do it to all of them? The world theology that Smith hopes for, and which indeed is already happening, is theology that takes place in the process. It happens in interconnected systems of tradition and in the ongoing interaction of religious people. It happens every time we encounter people of faith different from ourselves, and because of this grow in our own faith. It also happens whenever we understand our own religious tradition as unfolding on a world stage. In Professor Smith's words, Christians will not cease to be Christians, nor Muslims Muslim. What I mean is that Christians will participate as Christians in the religious history of humankind. And Muslims will participate in it as Muslims, Jews as Jews, Hindus as Hindus, Buddhists as Buddhists, Native Americans as Native Americans. To these we can add Unitarian Universalists will participate as Unitarian Universalists. An image for a world theology comes from looking at a photo of planet Earth, a photo not available to us until 1969. The image conveys that sense of energy and movement, streams of water, air, soil, and vapor endlessly shifting, coming together, drifting apart. Within the disparate eddies and swirls, there's a sense of oneness. Another image that I like is that of a dance in which all the Earth's people participate. Such a dance contains many different movements, all taking place at the same time. Some dancers whirl in place, while others go looking for new partners. Occasionally, someone like Jesus or the Buddha takes off across the floor, drawing in other dancers, giving them new energy and life. Many different forms, colors, and rhythms make up one dance, and it is one dance. So how do we get there? How do we join the dance? Well, one obvious step is that of interfaith dialogue or conversation, which this church is immersed in various periods of history, including perhaps this one. Humankind has made progress in this area, and it's threatened now, but in this church we keep it up. And in this church, with its diversity of beliefs, we don't even have to step outside the building to engage in dialogue. But the process doesn't stop there. From the conversation, something new may begin to flow. We may learn not only to talk to people of neighboring faiths, but to understand how they see the world as they do. And if we continue that process, it may even take us beyond understanding. As we are able to understand our neighbor, we may undergo a shift in perception and begin to see the world through our neighbor's eyes. And when that happens, we not only learn, we may undergo a change of heart. As Professor Smith wrote, the first step is to understand the faith of other folk. Once that step has been truly taken, the next step is the realization that there are no other folk. At the deepest levels, we are all one. So I thought Peter Mayer's Blue Boat Home might be a good closing hymn. Happy to have Becky Talent leading us, Steve accompanying us on the piano. Number 1064 in the turquoise hymnal, Blue Boat Home.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community which burns on in our hearts. You are invited to join us for coffee and juice and conversation in Daniel Hall, which is right here. And our benediction comes from the Reverend Robert Doss. For all who came this morning seeking God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Go in peace.